After the downfall of a criminal empire that had long held Fairmont, West Virginia in its vice-like grip during the 1920s, the investigation into the brutal murder of Bella Lemon marked a turning point, ending an era of lawlessness and vice. Now we look to Fairmont historian Dr. Raymond Alvarez to lead us through the transformation of this area into the vibrant space it has become today, Palatine Park.
My name is Dr. Raymond Alvarez, and I am very excited about this anthology series about Water Street and Palatine because, again, it's a piece of forgotten history which John has brought back to our daily lives here so we can remember it. The interesting thing with this story, it also intersects with the life and times of C.E. Ned Smith. He was the longtime editor of the Fairmont Times. His family owned the Fairmont Index, the Times, the Fairmont Times. They were in the newspaper business for, I don't know, probably 100 years or more. And he was editor around 1920, from the 20s to the 1950s. And he wrote a daily column. So when it comes to Water Street, he started writing about this. The first one I found was in July 1926, and he had been up inspecting the new Fairmont City Reservoir, which is today, part of Morris Park, and he was talking about the beautiful panorama up there. But as he drove home and crossing the river, he wrote this: "And when we came home, we passed through Water Street as it lay hideous in the glare of the afternoon sun. How quickly could a deft hand obliterate this, thought we, and plant this wilderness of humanity with flowers and shrubs and shade trees." In September 1934, he brings the subject up again by commenting on Dr. George Bevans of the First Presbyterian Church, who delivered a sermon on the behalf of slum eradication on Water Street. And he wrote, "We have known for some time that Water Street Park idea is taking hold. But when a man like Dr. Bevans begins to preach from his pulpit, the signs are growing most propitious. As things stand today, the mere presence of Water Street is a disgrace to the city." And then he goes on, he said, it's not the people's fault, but it's basically how this area was basically allowed to degenerate. Part of that was the construction of the $1 Million Bridge, because that, in essence, cut off Water Street, hid Water Street from view, and it became, like a small little area that was dark, secretive. Trash was just thrown from the tenements along the riverbanks. And Mr. Smith's office was actually in the old normal school at the top of Adams Street. That's where Booth Towers is. His column is very easy when he talks about it. But then he says, if the entire East Side riverbank could be turned into a city park, and at the same time the present slums, which repeat are a disgrace to the city, would be removed forever. And so again, he's advocating about civic improvement, and he envisioned that as a park. He writes about Water Street, and he says, at one time Water Street was a principal business thoroughfare on the east side, but when the Monongahela Railroad was built, a high retaining wall shut off the street and isolated it from the rest of the business section over there. And with the construction of the high-level bridge, Merchant Street came into her own, and Water Street was sort of in a state of isolation, solitary isolation. And so in 1947, again, he's writing about it and all the crime. He said, the street was left to the dregs mostly, and the flotsam and jetsam of an industrial community which drifted into the eddies of this forgotten thoroughfare. So Mr. Smith, campaigned to bring this to his attention. Unfortunately, he died in 1957, but something good happened. Around 1958, finally, the city of Fairmont passed an $800,000 revenue bond, and that included a new Everest Drive, and it also included the eradication of all the buildings, and that became the long-awaited cleanup project for Water Street, and you had, at least the riverbank, you had a little bandstand, you had a fountain, but he had a green area with plantings there. And so this came about, unfortunately, after Mr. Smith died. He never knew this, but in the 1963 Centennial Yearbook of Marion County, an article that was called Palatine Park is a long-awaited cleanup project. What it says is, Fairmont's beautiful Palatine Park is a dream at long last come true. The former Water Street slum district bordering on the East Bank with its disgraceful and unsightly buildings, poorly kept, the slum, it's been transformed into an area of beauty. And so civic pride replaced shame. And I thought that was a good lead-in to the efforts to finally take care of Water Street. And people like the editor of the newspaper, like I said, from 1927 to the late 40s, he's calling for eradication of that area. Let's create a park. And the first the stages of this occurred with that city revenue bond, and then many years later, when you get the present day, the county commission, the government agencies came together to create what we have today, which is a beautiful facility. Activities go there all summer. I mean, this is what Mr. Smith envisioned back in 1927, and that's the beauty of this story. And we are very fortunate in this community to have so many activities that take place there over the summer, and they're all free. So it really is a beautiful spot today. The history is very rich, and we shouldn't forget about it. And that's the beauty of looking back and unearthing this part of Fairmont history.